Let's talk about a war that the West is barely paying attention to. A war happening right now in Sudan. Since April 2023, Sudan has been torn apart by a brutal power struggle between the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces. This is not just a local conflict. It has drawn in foreign backers, created one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, and threatens to destabilize the entire region. To understand what's happening in Sudan, we need to look at who these groups are, how they were formed, why they are fighting, and which outside powers are fueling the war. First, let's take a brief look at history. Since gaining independence from the British Empire in 1956, Sudan has been plagued by almost constant conflict. From the very beginning, the country was divided, not just politically, but ethnically, religiously, and geographically. Sudan cycled through governments with alarming frequencies. Some leaders were democratically elected, while others seized power through military coups. Each change promised stability, yet each one only deepens the country divisions. The first Sudanese civil war erupted in 1955, just before independence. It was largely a struggle between the Arab-dominated north and the Christian and enemy south. After 17 years of fighting, the war ended with a fragile peace, but it did not last. In 1983, the second Sudanese civil war began. This time, the conflict was even bloodier. The government in Khartoum attempted to impose Islamic law across the entire country, which reignited southern resistance. The war dragged on for more than 2 decades and claimed the lives of an estimated 2 million people. Eventually, in 2005, a peace agreement was reached. 6 years later, in 2011, the South voted overwhelmingly to secede, creating the world's newest state, South Sudan. But while the separation ended one conflict, it left the north weakened and unstable. Amidst all this turmoil, one man rose to power, Omar al-Bashir. In 1989, he staged a military coup and established an authoritarian regime. Bashir would rule Sudan for 30 years, combining strict Islamic law with ruthless repression. His government became infamous for human rights abuses, corruption, and for fueling another devastating conflict, the war in Darfur. Amidst this turmoil in Darfur, al-Bashir's government resorted to arming various Arab militias to suppress rebellions in Darfur. One of the most notorious groups was the Janjaweed, a nomadic Arab militia originally mobilized to counter non-Arab insurgents in Western Sudan. They were accused of ethnic cleansing, rape, and mass killing. Acts so brutal that international observers linked them to a genocide. Although Bashir denied direct government involvement, evidence shows these militias were supplied with weapons and vehicles by state intelligence agency to carry out counterinsurgency sweeps. In 2013, Bashir formally restructured these forces into an organized paramilitary unit, the Rapid Support Forces, also known as RSF. Its roots lay deeply embedded in the Janjaweed's campaign of terror, but now presented as a border intelligence unit. It served as a Praetorian guard of sorts for the regime. At its helm stands Lieutenant General Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, widely known as Hemedti. A former Janjaweed commander, Hemedti transitioned to lead the RSF and rapidly expand its size and influence. Under his command, the RSF grew from just a few thousand fighters to an estimated 100,000 strong by 2023, with deployments even reaching Libya and serving as a key security forces in Khartoum and Darfur. In April 2019, mass protests erupted across Sudan, triggering the downfall of longtime dictator Omar al-Bashir. On April the 11th, the military removed Bashir from power, dissolved the government, suspended the constitution, and installed a transitional military council to lead for 2 years. But the initial leader, General Ahmed Awan ibn Auf, held the post for just 1 day before handing over authority to General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the Inspector General of the Armed Forces, who became the TMC's chairman. By August 2019, the Transitional Military Council was replaced by the Sovereignty Council, a hybrid body made of both military officers and civilian representatives from the opposition. At its head stood General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the de facto head of state and the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. Alongside him as deputy was Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, Hemedti, the powerful leader of the Rapid Support Forces. In theory, the council was meant to guide Sudan towards civilian rule, but in practice, real power remained in the hands of Burhan and Hemedti. And while Burhan held the formal title of president, Hemedti was rapidly consolidating influence behind the scenes, positioning himself as the true force within the transitional government. The uneasy partnership between General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and his deputy Hemedti was always fragile. Both men share a common interest in removing Bashir and consolidating power. But beyond that, their vision for Sudan and their personal ambitions began to clash. In 2021, the transitional government, which included both military and civilian leaders, collapsed when Burhan and Hemedti staged a coup against civilian Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok. This move put the army and the RSF firmly back in control, but it also deepened mistrust between the two generals. The core issue was the future of the Rapid Support Forces. As part of Sudan's transition plan, the RSF was supposed to be integrated into the regular army. Burhan, as head of the armed forces, wanted full control over the integration, a process that would strip Hemedti of his independent power base. Hemedti, on the other hand, resisted. He demanded a gradual integration over 10 years, while also expanding his own network with foreign alliances, wealth, and fighters. By early 2023, tensions reached a breaking point. Neither side trusted the other, and both began mobilizing their forces in Khartoum and across Sudan. On April 15, 2023, open fighting erupted between the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces, which began as political rivalry between the two generals, quickly escalated into a nationwide war, tearing Sudan apart once again. The Rapid Support Forces have received backing from the United Arab Emirates, which is interested in controlling Sudan's gold trade and projecting influence along the Red Sea. On the other side, the Sudanese Armed Forces are supported by Egypt. For Cairo, the priority is stability on its southern border and control over the Nile waters. Iran has provided drones seeking to expand its influence into the Horn of Africa. Turkey and Qatar see Burhan's army as a useful counterweight to the UAE. Even Saudi Arabia, while claiming neutrality, has quietly leaned toward the army to balance its rivalry with Abu Dhabi. Over time, Hemedti didn't just build a paramilitary force, he carved out a space that looked very much like a state of its own. By late 2023, the RSF held virtually all of the Darfur. Their grip even extended into parts of North and West Kordofan, effectively creating the RSF-controlled region untethered from the Khartoum's authority. In April 2025, Hemedti declared formation of a government of peace and unity, a parallel administration aimed at the RSF-held zones. He vowed to issue new identity documents and even separate currency, promising education, healthcare, and justice for areas under the RSF control and beyond. Essentially, Hemedti built a mini-state with its own territory, governing structures, and population services, all operating parallel to Sudan's internationally recognized government. As of mid-2025, tens of thousands have been killed and more than 14 million people have been displaced. This has become the world's largest displacement crisis. The war has forced millions across Sudan's borders. Nearly 4 million have fled abroad, while tens of millions remained stuck within the country. Children, women, and vulnerable groups bear the heaviest burden, facing hunger, disease, and violence with little protection. Sudan now stands on the brink of total collapse. Factional warfare, famine, epidemic, disease, and systematic human rights abuses are tearing the nation apart. And without swift international intervention, millions more will suffer. Perhaps without the world ever realizing how such a catastrophe was allowed to happen.